Hi and welcome back. I'm Caroline Best of the Tao of Horsemanship. This is Everything Horses and More video channel. And today's video is going to be about bits or bitless. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, I did a video 5 years ago about bitless bridles, so you guys can check that out on my YouTube channel for more information on what I use and what I recommend. But today I'm going to dive in deep, and this has been an area that a lot of my students and followers have asked me to do for years, and I apologize that I haven't gotten to this sooner. So I'm going to dive in deep today about bits and bitless bridles. And you guys can make up your own mind about it. All right. Are you interested in going bitless, transitioning from the bit, and overwhelmed and confused with the many different opinions and choices out there? Are you tired of hearing other professionals talk about the bit not being painful to the horse, telling you that it's your hands and lack of skill that makes the bit painful? And if you are heavy-handed, if you're a heavy-handed rider and you're using a bit, you will be the same in a bitless bridle. While I do agree with hands, heavy hands make a heavy horse, it doesn't matter whether you ride bitless or with a bit. There's a lot to think about here, and the better educated and experienced we become, the easier this decision will be, whether you stay with a bit or you go bitless. I see often in my students who come to work with me personally, and they are excited and scared to transition from a bit to bitless. And 99% of them, when they transition over and they're riding, my schoolmasters, most of them. So my schoolmasters are well trained and educated in bitless. And it really is frightening for me to see so many of my students so heavy-handed. Most of them are so heavy-handed in the bitless bridles because it just shows me how heavy-handed they are with a bit. And it's not your fault. It's not their fault. This is how you're being taught to ride, period. And that's what I really want to focus on today, is how we're being taught to ride and the purpose of the bit. And why I train without bits. Okay, about bits. I've studied this topic. I studied this topic years ago when I got back into horsemanship. And that's when I also transitioned into the bitless training and riding many, many years ago because of what I found, which I'm going to share with you. So I've also developed every kind of horse you can think of at every age, every experience, in every discipline and at all levels. So you don't need a bit. The point I want to make is you do not need a bit to train your horse. And we're going to talk about the history of the bits. So here are the biggest issues I have with bits. Too many people train and use them incorrectly. They are taught to use a bit to control the horse's movement, their speed, and performance. It should not happen in the mouth. But everybody has this idea or ideal of how pretty the horse looks when they're round. Well, take the time to develop them correctly from the hind end first, and you will naturally, and that's what I teach in my Mastery Membership program, you will naturally be able to develop your horse's self-carriage, which will allow them to carry themselves in a collected, natural frame. If you study the history of the bit, you will learn that it was designed for refinement only and used on well-educated horses, meaning these horses had upper-level training. They were not beginner horses or starting horses or restarting horses. They were not young horses. And I'll read a little bit about the history of the bit. The second issue I have with bits. Heavy hands is a result of a lack of education and skill of the rider. It is also about a lack of education and development in the horse as well. My biggest purpose with this video is to educate you all why this keeps happening and that you have a responsibility. If you really care about the horse and the welfare of the horse, you have a responsibility. As long as you're going to continue to ride them, you have a responsibility to develop them and educate them. And it starts with you first. You need to become more educated. Number 3, bits are often used to make the horse comply, submit, and is mostly used today to control, not refine, the horse. And this is no different than dominance or force in your training or in your instruction. And what I really want to bring to your attention is the use of operant conditioning. And it's done so subtly and all the time. And I can't stand operant conditioning. And operant conditioning is used in most of our training today. Even our gentle training methods that are being promoted through clicker training, treat training, which I can't stand, and both clicker and treat are being used as positive reinforcement. But what you guys aren't seeing, I'm watching these people, and what you're not picking up is that they're also using operant conditioning. Number 4, because of the negative experiences and associations with bits, horses develop negative behaviors. These behaviors help them to cope with the pain and result in the following: snatching, riding behind the vertical, bolting, refusing to supple, pushing through, spooking. When I am starting a horse or retraining a horse, the biggest thing, the biggest point I need to make with that horse is they need to trust my hands. They need to trust my feel, my hands, my contact, nothing else. My hands is contact before anything. It just blows my mind how we don't think about it like this. We don't think about where the horse is coming from. And we just manhandle them. And the horse, we don't even properly introduce the halter or the bridle. And it should begin with our hands. Teaching the horse not to fear different applications of pressure, steady pressure around their flight zone. So it all begins with trust and a positive experience and association. So let's talk about bitless bridles. While bitless bridles spare the mouth, used inappropriately, they can also cause pain. Nose pain and swelling, particularly when constructed of harsh materials such as hard or thin rope or bands. Not to mention, a few of the bitless bridles use shanks, harsh chin straps made of metal or chain, or a thin piece of leather. And then we have the straps that you find in your side pulls that do not release. While these types of bitless bridles don't use bits, they are still painful if used incorrectly. I can't stand Dr. Hook's bridle or any type of bitless bridle that uses the side pull. So that means your reins are attached to leather or some material that goes underneath the horse's chin. So every time you pull on the reins, it puts pressure under the horse's chin, versus having something that just is more lateral here and just puts pressure on the nose, or like a Makati or a Hackamore or a Boselle, you have the vertical pressure. And that's where it's underneath the chin, but it's not tight on the chin. So when your reins are attached under the chin, so when you do have contact with the reins, it pulls on the pole. Horses are quick learners who retain everything they learn. They're sponges like young kids, and they are sensitive emotionally and physically. So why do we need harsh equipment, such as bits, spurs, excessive force, and manhandling methods to teach them? Something to think about. In the end, training takes time to learn and time to teach, and most of us either don't want to make the time or don't care about the horse's mental, emotional, and physical welfare. Whether you use a bit or not, you can create the same issues with both. So I personally prefer bitless, and for the following reasons. I follow the teachings and principles of the great classical horsemanship masters who trained horses to the upper levels without a bit. The bit's purpose was to refine and rebalance only. I begin with a soft rope halter and use several aids to help the horse learn how to give, yield to the pressure they feel around their pole, and nose. I believe that these two reasons produce a happier, the happiest, healthiest, and most trusting horse. In my years of retraining and developing riding foundations on thousands of horses, I've never had an unhappy or unsafe bitless horse. So the history of the bit. I have many articles that I'm going to leave in the description. You guys can click on the URLs. It was written by Dr. Max Galler and Bettina Drummond. I've mentioned Bettina Drummond before. She's one of the last remaining students of Nuno Oliveira. She studied, apprenticed with him for a long time. I also want to apologize ahead of time if I really bastardize a lot of the old great masters' names. I'm not the best linguist. So when you read the book of Johann Battista Galiberti, written in 1610 and translated into German in 1660, Galiberti, a pupil of Gerson and Pinatelli, recommends the training of the horses first in a cavasson or hackamore until the basics are established, and only then progressively introducing a bit. When you follow the classical dressage, such as the Spanish School of Riding, the bit is introduced at the very end of the horse and rider's education, so that the bit can just rebalance the horse. Because where does the horse produce the most resistance? In its top line. There's two spots in its top line. So that means when the horse is either bracing or defensive or loses its balance, just like us, we tighten up through our neck. So the pull is one point of resistance in the top line, and so is the shoulder wither area. And so the bit was designed, both the snaffle and the curb, designed to rebalance, and the only way you can rebalance the horse is to break open the resistance in the top line, which is at the pull or the shoulder. The bit was never used for training. It's the way I train. It's not used for training. So this is from Holistic Horse, bit or bitless. Bridles with bits and without have been used through history as various cultures sought to guide, control, and communicate with the horse. I just think they do a great job with this article. The history of bridles and bits goes as far back as 3500 to 3000 BC. Early bits were made of bone, horn, or hardwood before metal was mastered. The type of bridles and bits give insight into the cultural philosophy and views held toward the horse. From metal bits with large spiked spades designed to inflict pain, to nothing more than a piece of leather or rope tied around a horse's neck, nose, or mouth, like the Native Americans. It is odd that the focus has not been more on asking, what is the best way to communicate with my horse in these sports? Instead, many trainers have developed bits to get a horse to do a particular move for their particular discipline. Racehorses are trained to pull on the bit so they stretch their necks out to win by a nose, while dressage horses are trained to understand various pressures and movement of a bit to relate to some form of body maneuver. Why use a bit? I have specific articles and diagrams from dentists, from professionals, and vets and researchers that are going to explain why bits can be really painful and damaging to your horse. If you want to learn how to develop your horse correctly from the ground to riding, as well as develop you as a rider during that process, and be able to ride as one, check out my Mastery Membership Riding Foundation program. So this video is a snippet from my YouTube channel, which offers, a few free points. But if you want to hear the entire video, which offers a lot more information, please subscribe to my Everything Horses and More video library. Thank you. May you always be one with your horse.